Overwatch 2 is a 5v5 player hero shooter which requires the skills and cooperation of a team using the best of the hero's abilities in order to properly secure a victory. While the game is pretty easy to understand and there's not a lot of high tech in the game, there's still some advanced techniques such as Mercy's movement which gain a great boon to performance. Today, I'm going to teach you a new tech in Overwatch 2 that I discovered, the whip in Nene. But before we begin, we must get a good grasp on what the whip and Nene is. The whip and the Nene are two separate hip-hop dance moves that were conceived in the early to mid-2010s. The whip was created in 2014 by a YouTube channel called King Imprint, and involves the user to pull their arm out as if you were driving a car fully inclined. While the Nene dance was created 1 year earlier in 2013 by the Atlanta rap group We Are Tunes in their hit song Drop That Nene. The dance involves the user placing one arm in the air and swaying it from side to side. These dance moves were extremely popular in 2014 and other years, but usually performed separately, until 2015, in which rapper Silento released his hit single Watch Me, Whip/Nene, in which Silento, despite not having invented the dance moves, combines the two dance moves into a memorable, catchy, easy to understand song, as well as associating with other similar hip-hop dances that were popular at one time, such as the Stanky Leg and the Soldier Crank. Due to these factors, the song was an extreme hit, topping number 3 for 6 consecutive weeks in 2015 on the Billboard charts. Silento also killed his cousin, and there's a video of him with a prolapsed anus, but that's besides the point. In Overwatch, numerous heroes in the game can perform actions that resemble these famous dance moves. For most of the characters, this can be performed by hitting the melee button, in which most characters will thrust their fist or a similar appendage forward, and then quickly using the greeting emotion in the character wheel, which for most characters will resemble that of an Nene. I recommend binding the greeting key to an easy to access key or button, so you do not have to go into the menu, delaying it further. Feel free to practice it quite a bit to fully master it, as it may be a little tricky. The advantages? I don't know. It's funny. It's a great inside joke to have with friends. Good inside jokes equals better friendship. Better friendship equals better teamwork. Better teamwork equals better performance. And better performance equals better wins. But, unfortunately, due to the diverse roster of Overwatch with characters with different weapons and personalities, some characters cannot whip and Nene in such a manner. I will be going over every character in the game as of the making of this video and discuss their methods. In her mech form, D.Va can perform the whip and Nene. Although it can be debated if she is really doing the move or not, as she lets her mech do the whip and she whips in her mech. It's up to your interpretation. Outside of her mech, D.Va holds a pistol in her hand and does not pull her arm out in a similar way to a whip. However, this can technically count as a pistol whip, which is self-explanatory, as it's still a whip. While Doomfist can whip, Doomfist technically does not have a Nene in this sense, as he only raises his arm up and does not do any motion to it. By default, Junker Queen wields a knife and melees with it in hand. However, you can throw the knife, which will leave Junker Queen weaponless for a while. During this, you can whip. However, her wave is not the traditional Nene. It's Orisa main's lucky day because Orisa's whip and Nene is probably the closest to the original thing in the game, which is great. Ramastra's wave is a two-finger salute, and he does not clench his fist. The animations in his Nemesis form also do not resemble this move. Because of this, he cannot perform this. Reinhardt's melee is technically his normal attack where he swings his hammer. He does not wave, however. If you want a replacement, pulling out Rein's shield is a great alternative, as he does not move his arm forward in a way. Roadhog can perform the whip and Nene. Alternatively, you can use his chain move as a whip. Not only because it's technically a whip, but he does thrust his arm forward. Sigma can whip and Nene. You can also deploy a shield in replacement of the Nene, as well as help your team. Winston cannot Nene, as his wave animation is a salute. Wrecking Ball can whip and Nene, although, like D.Va, it can be debated if this is in fact a whip and Nene, as technically, one body is not completing the whole dance move. Although I think Wrecking Ball's melee randomly picked a side. I'm not surely sure how to control that, as well as the other things. Again, it's up to the player to decide if it hinders their attack or not. Zarya can perform the whip and Nene. Ashe can also perform the whip and Nene. Bastion can also perform the whip and Nene. Cassidy can hit a pretty cool whip. However, he cannot Nene as his wave is a finger gun type of animation. Echo can whip and Nene, and even if she didn't, her ultimate can copy the moveset of any other hero. So all the heroes she can turn into that can whip and Nene are applicable here. Genji cannot whip or Nene, as both his melee and wave are not the traditional type, being a sword slash and a two-finger salute gesture. Hanzo, like Ramatra, doesn't clutch his fist when he whips. Junkrat cannot Nene, as his wave is a finger gun sort of animation, unfortunately. Mei can whip and Nene, but very abnormally. Pharah cannot Nene, as her greeting is a salute gesture and not a traditional wave. Reaper cannot technically hit the whip, as he wields two shotguns and has no open hand whip with. If you count the whip in this sense as striking somebody with a firearm, then yes, it is a whip. Sojourn can whip a Nene. However, she does this with opposing hands, so I'm not really sure if that counts. Once again, up to interpretation. Soldier 76 cannot whip a Nene, as he uses a huge rifle as his melee. Sombra technically whips the Nenes with their SMG in her hand. However, if you want a more accurate gesture, use her special moves Hack, or the one where she throws the Translocator, as those involve moving her arm forward. Symmetra's gestures are a little more different than the traditional. She does not clench her fist when meleeing, and does a little bit of a finger flapping wave. It's honestly up to interpretation. Torbjorn is a little up in the air, as he uses a sort of claw prosthetic and thus is not akin to a human hand. His wave gesture is not like a traditional wave. Just make sure he quit with his gun and not his hammer, as his hammer does not evoke anything similar to a whip. Tracer cannot fully whip a Nene, as she wields two pistols, and her greeting is a traditional salute. Widowmaker uses both hands to thrust her rifle forward, which is not technically a whip, but her wave is quite giving Nene. Luckily, if you want to whip a Nene as Widowmaker, I suggest using her Venom Mine instead of the melee, as it more traditionally resembles the whip. Ana, sadly, cannot whip a Nene, as her greeting is once again another salute, and can't Nene. A mighty fine whip though, I must say. Baptiste can whip a Nene, but I find it quite interesting that if you wave and then melee, his melee ends up looking very limp. I don't know what's up with that. Blizzard, fix your fucking game. Baptiste needs to whip a Nene with power. Brigitte cannot traditionally whip a Nene, as she uses his mace. However, you can't consider this weapon to actually be a whip. You can use your left shift or shield to closely resemble the sequence of dance moves. Kiriko cannot whip a Nene, as her animations are quite different. Lucio can whip a Nene. You can also whip a Nene while wall riding, in case you need to know. Mercy has a staff in her right hand, which makes it a little weird, but she does thrust her arm forward in a manner similar to a whip, so I will consider it. If you switch to her pistol, you can use the pistol whip logic in this sense too. Moira has two different melee animations for each of her arms. I don't know if there's a way to control which hand, but her left hand more closely resembles the whip, but her right hand is more of a slash or a swipe, and thus not a whip. Her Nene is quite nice though. Maybe you can use her left click to heal, but that's kind of a stretch to me in my opinion. Zenyatta has a sick ass Nene, but his melee animation is a kick instead of a fist, which is quite honestly a shame. Although his attack animations involve moving his fist forward, but not technically it. Personally, I don't think he can, but once again, it's up to interpretation. So yeah, here are the characters who can whip a Nene, and here are the ones who cannot. Bye.